The internet being what it is, lies and fabrication spread all the time, and Warframe is no different. It's been a hot minute since my last myth busting video, so let's once again tackle 5 more myths in Warframe and see what's actually happening. I'm Nick Engineer, let's solve practical problem. While this isn't one of the main myths I'm covering today, I still come across a lot of people who believe that managing and trading prime parts, or any other loot, is supposed to be a chore in Warframe. If you're on PC and feel this way, you should check out the sponsor of today's video. Warframe is a powerful third-party companion app on PC designed to make your Warframe inventory simple to manage. Recently, it has gained a sleek new look, as well as improved integration with Warframe.market, making it easier than ever to trade your items. It also has a whole new ribbon section showing you what ribbons you have, how high each stat is, and it gives you a seamless way to list your ribbon for sale or auction. This means you spend less time fiddling with your inventory, allowing you to get back on with playing Warframe. Even there, Warframe's relic overlay helps you choose the best relic and best reward for every fisher. So download Warframe for free now with the link in the video description. Diving into our myths then, the very first is that ammo drops from enemies depend on the weapon you have equipped or kill them with. I can see how this myth could be true. DE did improve the swap rate of weapons and reduce the ammo on many AoE weapons. This pretty much suggests that they would want you to swap more. But then DE never actually said this ammo drop bias is a thing, so the only course of action is to test it. The obvious starting place is the simulacrum. It's easy to spawn in 20 enemies, kill them, see what they drop and repeat. So I did this 108 times over, switching between primary and secondary weapons for kills, using battery weapons and ammo based weapons, testing with both slots equipped or just one at a time, and testing against different types of enemies. The result, after 2,160 kills, is that basically no pattern emerged. None. The only real trend is that on average, the ammo drops for secondary weapons were marginally higher, just a few percent. This could be the simulacrum being weird though, it wouldn't be the first time. So I took to a mission repeatedly and again counted the ammo drops. It's not exactly the most thrilling endeavour, but hey, science isn't always about sharks with frickin' laser beams on their heads. The result is once again nearly nothing. Switching weapon didn't have a notable effect, and unequipping a weapon did just as little most of the time. Across every test done, there was once again a slight bias to secondary ammo drops, but this happened independently of every other factor. So overall, this myth is false. Our second myth today is also about drops, this time suggesting you can sometimes get resources from Sanctuary Onslaught. If you've paid attention in Sanctuary Onslaught and its elite variant, you would know that enemies do not drop resources and mods like in normal missions. The whole mode is basically an XP grinder. Most of the rounds, however, will spawn in lockers, but they will all be in a locked state. To get around this, you can use the mods Master Thief or Scavenge to either have your Warframe or companion unlock those lockers most of the time. By and large, your reward for opening lockers in this way will just be a couple credits and the occasional affinity, energy or health orb. However, you will also get, from time to time, some nav coordinates from these lockers. No other normal resource drops in this way, such as ferrite or detonite ampules, and nav coordinates have a very limited overall value. Rarer still, however, on the order of around 1% of the time, a locker can also produce an Iron Star, even in Sanctuary Onslaught. For such a low rate of return, modding for and opening these lockers is absolutely not worth it from a practical standpoint. But if you want to confuse your friends or random squad mates with an unexpected Iron Star drop, then you can at least be satisfied in knowing that this myth is true. You can indeed get a very limited selection of resource pickups from Sanctuary Onslaught by opening the lockers. Onto myth number 3, beam weapons do not use multishot correctly. This is a very mechanical myth and needs a little more explaining as to where it could come from. Most weapons fire either hit scan bullets or slower moving projectiles. Many but not all such weapons come with a spread on them such that one bullet or projectile can take a different path to the next one fired despite aiming in the same direction. If you have multishot on the weapon, then you will visibly see this spread of additional bullets. Some weapons have perfect accuracy, and this means you don't actually see the extra bullets, but they are still definitely there as shown in the damage hits on enemies. Beam weapons are different. They are perfectly accurate by design, though this can be changed by accuracy debuffs from corrupted mods. When debuffed in this way, rather than seeing multiple beams flailing around, we just see a single beam that drifts around the reticle. This is where we can start to see that multishot isn't what you'd expect on beam weapons. Rather than having a chance of additional beams flickering on and off as the multishot chance continuously re-rolls, it's instead applied as a buff to the original beam. A beam weapon with 1.5 times multishot will have a 50% chance of double the status chance and double the damage. If it was 2.5 times multishot, then half the shots will deal 2 times damage and have 2 times the status chance, while the other half of the shots will deal 3 times damage and 3 times status chance. Any other stats on the weapon, like critical chance, do not change, however. This has some strange implications. For example, let's say you have two 30% status chance weapons, one of them is a normal gun and one of them is a beam. For both weapons, 30% of their shots will proc a status effect. With 1.5 times multishot, however, the status application becomes different. The normal gun would fire off a second shot half the time, and that second shot would also have a 30% status chance. When the normal gun fires 2 shots like this, it will proc no status effects 49% of the time, 1 status effect 42% of the time, and 2 status effects 9% of the time. On average then, this is 0.6 status effects, exactly what you'd expect from 2 shots with a 30% chance. For the beam, however, it still only fires 1 beam, and that beam will have a 60% status chance if the multishot procs. It'll proc 1 status effect 60% of the time, and no status proc 40% of the time. We have a lower chance of no status, but we also have no chance of landing a second and potentially different status effect. This has a further effect on conditions which apply on hit. Primary weapons can be equipped with hunter munitions, applying a slash proc on critical hit 30% of the time. For a normal gun with a guaranteed critical hit, that's a 30% chance of a slash proc with every single hit. If we slap on, say, 2 times multishot, we will again have a 49% chance of no slash procs, 42% chance of 1 slash proc, and 9% chance of 2 slash procs with every pull of the trigger. If instead this was a beam weapon with guaranteed crits, however, 2 times multishot just means the damage and status chance are always doubled. We still have just 1 critical hit, giving us a 70% chance of no slash proc and 30% chance of 1 slash proc. The slash proc the beam delivers will always be double the damage of a single shot without the multi-shot bonus, whereas the slash procs a normal gun would deliver would all be only as strong as the individual shot before multi-shot happens. So counterintuitively, the nature of multi-shots on beams is that status effects from status chance become more reliable, but status effects from hunter munitions become less reliable. Despite these differences, the average outputs of both the gun and the beam remain identical if all other stats are the same. For status-resistant enemies like Acolytes and Kuvaliches, which only take a maximum of 4 status effects for most types, this actually makes the beam weapons stronger than guns with identical stats, because they'll be applying fewer but heavier status effects. In practice, however, beam weapons have a high fire rate and lower damage per shot compared to many guns, so that removes this potential advantage. Beam weapons then have one final quirk with multi-shot, and this only applies to a very specific category of beams. Weapons like the Ignis Wraith, Galaxian Vandal, and Gaze primary kit gun don't just put out a beam of damage, they also create a continuous sphere of damage around the target point, hitting all enemies in an AoE. When using these types of weapons, direct damage, such as pointing the Ignis directly at an enemy, will behave as we now expect. Multi-shot is multiplied into the damage when triggered, rather than creating additional beams. However, the zones these beams create do not get the benefit of multi-shot. Seeing as how a single mod can give you 230% multi-shot bonus, that is a hefty bonus to not have apply. So between single beams becoming enhanced rather than duplicated, hunter munitions proccing less often, and beam explosions gaining no benefit from multi-shot, the myth that beam weapons don't use multi-shot correctly is definitely true. The fourth myth in this video is that the Lephantis cannot drop the same Nekros part 2 runs in a row. This myth harkens back to before the introduction of Deimos, when the infested Orokin tiles were actually part of the now removed Orokin Derelict. So the myth goes that because you needed keys to access the Lephantis fight, you were guaranteed to at least get a different Nekros drop than you did on your previous run as the host. While I can't go back in time to verify that, we can look at today's drops to see if that's still the case. Nekros does stand out from most other assassination reward warframes, in that all 3 Nekros pieces have identical 1 in 3 drop rates, rather than a reduced rate for the systems as we see with almost every other such frame. It seems reasonable then, if these rates still exist, then maybe the drop protection does too. I can tell you however, with absolute certainty, that it does not. 3 runs in a row I got the Nekros Neuroptics, simple as that. So don't rely on outdated information, trust your eyes. Lephantis absolutely can drop the same part twice in a row, making this myth false. Our 5th myth is a simple yet bold assertion. Blast damage is useless. I get it. Blast damage has reduced damage against ferrite armor, including most Grineer and sentient units, some infested, corrupted and corpus units, and an array of bosses. It's also terrible against infested sinew, ruling out most Amos units. While it does have a bonus against fossilized health for some infested units, corrosive has an even bigger bonus and also cuts through any armored ones that pop up. In fact, the vast majority of units vulnerable to blast damage are actually in Railjack, where you don't really choose damage types, you choose weapon types. If that wasn't bad enough, the blast status effect is so underwhelming that the only people who'd miss it being removed are those using blast procs for condition overload purposes. But is blast damage actually useless? One of the units actually weak to blast damage is the Tusk Thumper. These hardy and surprisingly agile enemies plague many a fisherman on the plains of Eidolon. Usually, radiation is the recommended damage type due to the alloy armor these thumpers have. But if you strip their armor entirely, then the single best damage type to kill them would actually be blast damage. Now in most cases, you could just not worry about their armor and annihilate them easily with a well-modded Necromech, but stripping their armor and having bonus damage against their health matters a whole lot more if you happen to be on the steel path. The other use case that exists is a boss I've already mentioned in this video, Lephantis. Lephantis is unarmored and uses a fossilized health type, giving blast damage a 50% bonus and corrosive a 75% bonus. On the surface, it looks like corrosive would be better. Most of the time, corrosive would be the correct answer. However, if you're using a secondary weapon for direct damage and you have the mod primed heated charge, you can mod for higher blast damage than you can for corrosive damage due to the primed mod's bonus. Convulsion and pathogen rounds give 180% elemental damage bonus and they create corrosive, giving you approximately a 315% bonus to your damage output versus no elemental mods. Swapping out to deep freeze and primed heated charge, the elemental bonus is now a total of 255%, giving you approximately a 382.5% bonus to your damage output versus no elemental mods. Only secondary weapons have a primed mod for heat damage, meaning only they can get the higher blast damage than can be achieved with corrosive. This math still works out if you add on an extra 60/60 mod to both the blast and corrosive damage builds, and it would be unwise to mod more than 3 elemental mods due to the stacking of additive bonuses being worse than just going for a different stat. So what this means is that in the case of fighting Lephantis, a boss with a higher damage vulnerability to corrosive than blast, the lack of any armor to deal with in the fight and the imbalance of secondary elemental mods means blast damage is actually the optimal choice. That's not because blast damage is better, but because the maximum bonus you can get for blast is better. So begrudgingly, this means that the myth blast damage is useless is actually false, but it's still painfully niche. Now I know I said, again, 5 myths for this video, but I must address a myth from my previous video a few months ago. I wasn't wrong, but the game has changed since then. I can now confirm that a Eurali Spectre will cast abilities, opting to use everything except for Merlina. Instead, it's now Varuna's turn to cast no abilities as a Spectre. I'm sure these will get added in at some point, but for now, the Wolves are taking a break. That's all we've got time for in today's myth busting video. Check out the others if you haven't already caught those ones. A thank you to those of you supporting me as members on either Patreon or here on YouTube. You're all awesome. And as always, dispel myths, use blast, and fight well, Tenno.